Hello, my friends. Today I want to begin with something very honest, something that I think many of you have experienced, but perhaps never said out loud. Here it is. Most English learners spend years studying the language, years sitting in classrooms, years doing grammar exercises and memorizing vocabulary lists and taking tests. And yet when they sit down to read a real English article, a real English book, a real English email from a foreign colleague, they feel slow, they feel uncertain, they feel like they are fighting against every sentence rather than flowing through it. If that sounds familiar, if that gap between studying English and actually reading English comfortably is something you know well, then today I am speaking directly to you. Because today I want to share with you something so simple that you might almost dismiss it. I want to talk about 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes of reading English every single day. And I want to show you, with stories and science and honesty, how those 10 minutes, small as they seem, can change your English in ways that will surprise you. Not in weeks, not in months, but slowly, quietly, powerfully, in ways that will one day make you look back and say, that is when everything changed. That is when reading stopped being hard. That is when English started to feel like mine. So stay with me today, because what I am about to share with you is simple enough to start tonight and powerful enough to last a lifetime. Let me start by telling you something about the human brain that I find endlessly fascinating. Your brain is not like a computer that simply stores information you put into it. Your brain is a living, dynamic, constantly adapting system that changes its own structure based on what you do repeatedly. Scientists have a phrase for this. They say neurons that fire together, wire together. What this means in simple language is that every time you do something repeatedly, the brain builds stronger and stronger connections for that activity. It becomes easier, it becomes faster, it becomes more automatic. This is true for playing piano, it is true for riding a bicycle, it is true for speaking a language, and it is absolutely true for reading. When you read in English regularly, your brain builds dedicated neural pathways for processing English text. Pathways that recognize English words faster and more automatically with every reading session. Pathways that understand English sentence structure more naturally. Pathways that connect English words to meanings without the slow, effortful process of translation. And the remarkable thing about these pathways is that they do not need hours of practice every day to grow. They need consistency. They need regular activation. They need you to show up every day and give them 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. And over time, those 10 minutes will build something in your brain that no single long study session ever could. Now I want to tell you a story, because stories are how we truly understand things. Not theories, not science, stories. This is the story of a man named Yusuf. Yusuf was 28 years old. He worked in an office where English was increasingly important. His colleagues sent emails in English. His company had international partners. Meetings were sometimes conducted in English, and Yusuf felt left behind. Not because he was unintelligent, not because he had not studied. He had studied English for years. But reading in English felt slow and painful to him. Every sentence required effort. Long emails from his foreign colleagues took him 20 minutes to read and understand. He felt embarrassed. He felt frustrated. He felt like English was a wall he could not climb over. One evening, sitting with a friend who spoke excellent English, Yusuf asked the question that had been sitting inside him for a long time. How did you get so comfortable reading in English? And his friend gave him an answer that surprised him with its simplicity. She said, I just read something in English every morning. Not a lot, just a little. Every single day without fail. Yusuf thought about this. He expected her to say she had taken some special course, or used some expensive program, or spent hours every day in intense study. But she had not done any of those things. She had just read a little every morning, every day, without stopping. Yusuf decided to try. He started small, smaller than small. Every morning before he opened his work emails, before he looked at his phone, he read one short article in English, just one article. Something between 3 and 5 minutes of reading. He chose topics he actually cared about. Technology, football, cooking. Things that made him want to know what came next. The first week was slow. He stopped at difficult words. He reread sentences that confused him. But he kept going. He finished each article even when it was hard. The second week was a little easier. Some of the vocabulary he had seen the week before appeared again, and this time it felt familiar. Not fully understood, but familiar. Like a face you have seen before, but whose name you have not yet learned. By the end of the first month, something real had changed. Yusuf was reading faster. Not dramatically faster, but noticeably faster. Words that had stopped him before now passed through his eyes and into his understanding smoothly. Sentences that had required 2 or 3 readings before now made sense on the first pass. And one morning, about 6 weeks into his practice, he opened a long email from a foreign partner and read it in 3 minutes. He looked at the clock. 3 minutes. The same kind of email that had once taken him 20 minutes. He sat quietly for a moment, feeling something he had not felt about English for a very long time. He felt capable. And that feeling, once it arrives, does not leave easily. I want to explain to you now exactly what was happening inside Yusuf's brain during those 30 days of morning reading. Because understanding what is happening gives you the patience to keep going when progress feels invisible. The first thing that was happening is what reading researchers call automaticity development. When you first learn to read in any language, the process of recognizing words requires conscious effort. Your eyes look at a word, your brain works to decode it, to connect the letters to sounds, to connect those sounds to a meaning. This process takes time and energy, but with repeated exposure to the same words in different contexts, this decoding process becomes automatic. It happens below the level of conscious thought. Your eyes see the word, and the meaning arrives instantly, without effort, without translation. This is what Yusuf was building with his daily reading. Every time he saw a familiar word, he was making its recognition a little more automatic, a little faster, a little more effortless. And as more and more words became automatic, his reading speed increased naturally. Not because he was trying to read faster, but because his brain was doing the work faster. The second thing that was happening is what language researchers call incidental vocabulary acquisition. This is a beautiful phrase for something very simple. It means learning new words without trying to learn them. Just by encountering them in context, in real reading, your brain picks up new vocabulary naturally. Not perfectly, not completely, but gradually and cumulatively. Each time you encounter an unfamiliar word in a reading context, your brain makes a small attempt to connect it to meaning. Sometimes it figures it out from context. Sometimes it does not. But the attempt is made. And the next time you see that word, the attempt is easier. And the time after that, easier still. Until one day you realize that a word you could not understand 3 weeks ago now makes immediate sense. Not because you studied it, but because you read it enough times in enough different contexts for your brain to figure it out. This is how extensive reading builds vocabulary. Quietly, naturally, powerfully. The third thing happening is something I find particularly important. It is the development of what I call English intuition, a sense of how English works at a deep level that cannot be taught explicitly. When you read a great deal in English, you absorb not just vocabulary and facts, you absorb patterns. The patterns of how English sentences are built, how ideas are connected, how information flows from one sentence to the next, how a writer signals that a new idea is coming, how contrast is expressed, how emphasis is created. None of these things need to be explicitly taught if you read enough, because your brain recognizes patterns. It extracts rules from examples without being told what the rules are. And those extracted, implicitly learned rules become your intuition, your sense of what sounds right, your ability to write a sentence and know before anyone tells you whether it works or not. And this intuition is one of the most valuable things you can develop as an English learner, because it serves you in every situation, not just when you are reading, but when you are writing, when you are speaking, when you are listening. It is the foundation of genuine language competence. Now let me talk about something that stops many English learners from benefiting from reading. And it is something so common that I want to address it directly and honestly. Many learners approach reading in English as a decoding exercise. They treat every sentence as a puzzle to be solved, every unknown word as an obstacle to be overcome. They read with a dictionary in one hand and a grammar book in the other. They stop at every difficult word. They translate every sentence. They turn a potentially enjoyable experience into something exhausting and joyless. And because it is exhausting and joyless, they do it less and less. And eventually they stop entirely. And then they say reading does not work for them. But it is not reading that does not work. It is the approach that does not work. Let me tell you the approach that does work. The approach that builds real reading competence. The approach that Yusuf used and that his friend used and that I have seen work again and again with learners all over the world. The approach is simple. Read to understand the meaning, not to understand every word. These are two completely different goals. And the first one leads to fluency, while the second one leads to frustration. When you read to understand the meaning, you allow yourself to encounter unknown words and keep moving. You trust the context to give you enough information to follow the story or the idea. You accept that some things will be unclear and you continue anyway. This is how fluent readers read, not by understanding every single word perfectly, but by understanding enough, by following the thread of meaning through the text, by letting the parts they understand carry them over the parts they do not. And this approach, when practiced consistently, does something remarkable. It makes reading feel more natural, more like swimming and less like fighting against the current. And when reading feels natural, you want to do it more. And when you do it more, you get better. And when you get better, it feels even more natural. This is the positive cycle that fluent reading creates. And getting into that cycle starts with changing your goal from understanding every word to understanding the meaning. Let me now talk about how to choose what to read, because this is crucial. And I want to give you very practical guidance that you can use immediately. The most important principle is this: read things you genuinely want to read, not things you think you should read, not things that will impress people, not things that are most educational in theory, things that you actually find interesting and enjoyable. Because interest is the engine of reading. Without it, reading is a chore. With it, reading is a pleasure. And a pleasure you will do every day. A chore you will avoid. Think about what you love in your native language. What topics could you read about for hours without getting bored? Sports, science, history, fashion, technology, business, health, relationships, travel. Whatever it is, there is English content about it. Enormous amounts of English content. More than you could read in 100 lifetimes. Find the English version of what you already love. Find English articles, blogs, books, stories on those topics. Because when the content is familiar and beloved, the language barrier becomes smaller. Your passion for the topic carries you through the difficult parts. Your desire to know what comes next keeps you turning the page even when a sentence is confusing. Let me give you a specific example. Imagine you love football. You know everything about football in your language. You know the players, the teams, the tactics, the history. You follow every match with deep interest. Now imagine reading a football article in English. Even if some words are unfamiliar, you can often figure out what is happening because you know football. You know what kinds of things are said about football. You know the context. And that contextual knowledge becomes a scaffold for your language understanding. It holds you up while your English is still developing. This is why reading about topics you know deeply is so powerful for English learners. The content knowledge compensates for gaps in language knowledge. And over time, as your language grows, the content knowledge becomes less necessary. But in the beginning, it is a powerful support. Now I want to talk about the level of difficulty. And I want to give you a very simple test that you can use to know whether a piece of reading is at the right level for you. It is called the 5-finger rule. Open any page of what you want to read. Read one paragraph. Every time you encounter a word you do not know, hold up one finger. If by the end of the paragraph you have held up 5 fingers or more, the text is probably too difficult for comfortable reading practice right now. If you have held up 0 or 1 finger, it might be a little too easy. But if you have held up 2 to 4 fingers, you are in what researchers call the zone of proximal development. The zone where you know most of it but not all of it, where you are challenged but not overwhelmed, where growth happens fastest. This is the sweet spot. Find material that falls in this zone, and your 10 minutes every day will be maximally effective. Let me now give you something very practical, a specific 10-minute reading routine that you can start tonight and continue for the rest of your life. Because the goal is not 30 days. The goal is a habit, a permanent, daily, joyful habit of reading English. Something that becomes as natural and automatic as eating breakfast or brushing your teeth. Something you do not think about or debate or schedule. Something you just do every day because it is part of who you are, a person who reads English. So here is the routine. Every morning, before anything else, before social media, before news, before email, sit down in a comfortable place with something to read in English. Something you chose the night before. Something you are genuinely curious about. Something at the right level for you. And read for 10 minutes. Just 10. Set a timer if you need to. But give those 10 minutes your complete, undivided attention. No phone notifications, no background noise if you can avoid it, just you and the English text. And read. Not to study, not to memorize, just to read, just to follow the meaning, just to experience English. While you read, follow this simple approach. When you encounter a word you do not know, try to figure out its meaning from the context around it. What is the sentence about? What kind of word would make sense here? Is it a noun, verb, adjective? Does the paragraph give any clues? Give yourself 10 seconds to guess, then move on regardless. Do not stop for more than 10 seconds on any single word, because your flow is more valuable than any single vocabulary item. If the same word appears again and again and you still cannot figure it out, make a small mental note to look it up after your reading time is finished. Not during, after. During the 10 minutes, keep reading. At the end of your 10 minutes, before you close the page or put down the book, take 30 seconds to think about what you read. What was the main idea? What was the most interesting thing? What surprised you or made you think? This 30-second reflection is not required, but it is valuable because it helps your brain consolidate what it absorbed. It transforms passive reception into active understanding, and it takes only 30 seconds, so it is worth doing. Then, and only then, if there were words you wanted to look up, look them up. Write them down if you enjoy vocabulary journaling. But do this after your reading, not during, because protecting the flow of your reading experience is the most important thing. Everything else is secondary. Now, I want to talk about something that many people do not consider when they think about reading for English learning. And that is the question of what to do when you finish a piece of reading and feel like you only understood part of it. Maybe you understood 60%, maybe 70%, and you feel uncertain about the parts you missed. Many learners in this situation feel like they failed, like they did not do the exercise correctly, like they need to go back and understand everything before moving forward. But I want to completely change this perspective, because partial understanding is not failure. Partial understanding is exactly how learning works. Think about how a child learns their native language. They hear sentences they only partially understand all the time. They hear words used in contexts where they can grasp the general meaning, but not every nuance. And they keep going. They keep listening. They keep engaging. And slowly, through repeated partial encounters, their understanding deepens. The same process works in reading. When you read something and understand 70%, you have learned something. Your brain has made connections. It has encountered new vocabulary and context. It has absorbed new sentence patterns. And the next time you read something on the same topic, you will understand a little more. And the time after that, a little more still. Partial understanding, accumulated day after day over weeks and months and years, becomes complete understanding. But only if you keep going. Only if you do not stop at the first moment of confusion and decide that reading is not working. I want to tell you something now about the relationship between reading and writing, because this is something that most English learners do not think about enough. Reading and writing are not two separate skills that happen to both involve the English language. They are deeply connected. They feed each other. They build each other. When you read extensively in English, you are absorbing the architecture of English expression, how ideas are organized, how arguments are structured, how descriptions are built, how dialogue flows, how a good opening sentence draws the reader in, how a good closing sentence leaves something resonating. All of this architecture enters you through reading. And when you then sit down to write in English, even just an email or a message, that architecture becomes available to you. It shapes your sentences without you consciously realizing it. It gives your writing a natural structure and flow that you could never achieve simply by studying grammar rules. I have seen this in many people. People who read widely in English naturally write better than people who study writing rules intensively but do not read. Because writing well is not primarily about knowing the rules. It is about having felt from the inside how good English expression works. And that feeling only comes from reading. So every 10 minutes you spend reading English is not just improving your reading. It is secretly, quietly, powerfully improving your writing at the same time, and your speaking, and your listening, because everything in language is connected, and reading is the thread that runs through all of it. Now I want to address something that I know is in the minds of many of you right now. You are thinking, 10 minutes is not very much. How can 10 minutes really make a difference? I understand this doubt. I have felt it myself. When we face a big challenge, we tend to think we need a big solution, a big effort, a big commitment, a 10-hour study marathon, a special intensive course, something that matches the size of the problem with the size of the solution. But language learning does not work that way. Language learning is not about intensity, it is about consistency. And 10 minutes done every single day for a year is not 10 minutes. It is 60 hours of reading, 60 hours of deeply focused engagement with English text, 60 hours of your brain building neural pathways for English reading, 60 hours of incidental vocabulary acquisition, 60 hours of absorbing English patterns and structures and rhythms. And 60 hours spread consistently across an entire year will transform your reading in ways that no single week of intensive study could match. Because the brain does not grow through intensity, it grows through repetition. It grows through showing up. It grows through the small, daily, unspectacular act of sitting down and reading for 10 minutes. Every single day. Let me talk now about what happens to your relationship with English when you make daily reading a permanent part of your life. Not just what happens to your reading comprehension, although that will certainly improve dramatically, but what happens to your entire relationship with the language. When you read English every day, English stops being a foreign language to you. It stops being something external, something you have to reach for, something that lives outside your daily experience. It becomes part of your daily life. Like coffee in the morning, like the news, like the conversations you have with the people around you. English becomes woven into your day. And when something is woven into your day, it changes how you feel about it. It stops being scary. It stops being overwhelming. It starts to feel familiar, natural, even comfortable. And that comfort, that sense of English as part of your life, rather than a challenge you are preparing for, is one of the most valuable things you can develop as a learner. Because comfortable learners keep learning. Uncomfortable learners stop. I want to tell you about something that happened to me years ago that I have never forgotten. There was a time when I was building my company and English was essential for everything. For communicating with partners, for reading contracts, for understanding international trends, for representing my company in the global arena. And I remember sitting with a very long English document that I needed to understand completely. It was technical, it was detailed, it was important, and I read it, not without effort, but without fear. I moved through it steadily. When I encountered something unclear, I did not panic. I read the surrounding sentences more carefully. I used context. I made my best understanding and continued. And I finished that document, and I understood what I needed to understand. And in that moment, I thought about all the reading I had done over the years. All the books, all the articles, all the morning newspapers, all the borrowed English magazines, all the small daily encounters with written English that had built my reading competence over time. It had not been built by one great effort. It had been built by thousands of small efforts, thousands of 10 minutes. And they had added up to something that served me in that important moment. That is the promise of daily reading, not dramatic transformation, but quiet, cumulative, permanent growth that will be there for you when you need it. Now let me give you some specific types of reading material that I recommend for different stages of your journey, because choosing well makes your 10 minutes more effective. And I want to give you very concrete ideas you can act on tonight. If you are a beginner, start with graded readers. These are books and stories written specifically for English learners with controlled vocabulary and grammar. They are not boring. They tell real stories. They explore real ideas. But they do so with language that is carefully chosen to be accessible at your level. Graded readers come in different levels, from complete beginner to upper intermediate. Find your level and start there. Read complete stories. Enjoy the experience of finishing something, because finishing a piece of reading, even a short, simple one, builds confidence. It tells your brain that English reading is something you can do, and that belief, that I can do this feeling, is one of the most important things you need to keep going. If you are at an intermediate level, start exploring authentic English content. Things written for real English audiences. Not simplified, not adapted, real. Children's books and young adult novels are wonderful at this level because they are written in clear, natural English without being condescending. Some of the most beautiful writing in the English language is found in books written for younger readers. Simple, precise, powerful language that anyone of any age can appreciate. News articles on topics you love are also excellent at this level. Short opinion pieces, blog posts by writers whose topics interest you. At this level, you have enough English that authentic material is within reach. And authentic material is where your English will really start to grow. If you are at an upper intermediate or advanced level, the entire world of English reading is open to you. Novels, biographies, essays, journalism, science writing, business books, literary nonfiction, whatever interests you most. At this level, the question is not what can you handle, but what do you want to explore? And the answer to that question is entirely yours to discover. Read widely, read deeply, read things that challenge your ideas and expand your understanding. Because at this level, reading in English is not just a language learning exercise. It is a way of engaging with the world, a way of accessing knowledge and beauty and wisdom. And you have worked hard to reach this point. Enjoy everything it gives you. I want to talk now about one more thing that I believe is important, but that nobody talks about enough when they discuss reading for English learning. And that is the physical act of reading aloud. Because reading silently and reading aloud are two different experiences with two different sets of benefits. When you read silently, you are primarily training your eyes and your comprehension. But when you read aloud, even just for a portion of your 10 minutes, you are training your eyes and your comprehension and your mouth and your ears and your pronunciation and your rhythm all at the same time. You are hearing yourself produce English. You are hearing how the words sound when they come out of your mouth. You are training the physical apparatus of English speech at the same time as you are building your reading fluency. This combination is extremely powerful. And for learners who feel that their speaking does not match their understanding, reading aloud is one of the best bridges between receptive competence and productive fluency. You do not need to read aloud for your entire 10 minutes. Even 2 or 3 minutes of reading aloud within your session can make a significant difference. Choose a passage you find particularly beautiful or interesting. Read it once silently to understand it. Then read it aloud, slowly, paying attention to the sound of the words, the rhythm of the sentences, the natural pauses. And you will discover something wonderful, that good English writing has a music to it, a rhythm that you can feel in your body when you speak it aloud. And feeling that rhythm in your body is one of the fastest ways to internalize the sound of natural English, to make it your own. Now let me bring everything together and leave you with 3 things that I want you to carry with you long after today. 3 simple ideas that will stay with you and guide your reading practice every morning. The first idea is this: 10 minutes every day is not a small thing. It is everything. It is the difference between an English learner who progresses and one who stays stuck. It is the difference between reading that improves and reading that never changes. 10 minutes sounds small because we are used to thinking about learning in terms of big efforts. But the brain does not care about big efforts. The brain cares about regular signals, regular activation, regular reinforcement. And 10 minutes every day provides that, consistently, reliably, powerfully. So never let anyone, including yourself, tell you that 10 minutes is not worth it. 10 minutes is worth everything. The second idea is this: read what you love. Not what you think you should love, not what looks most educational, not what will most impress your teacher or your colleagues, what you actually love. Because love is the engine of consistent reading, and consistent reading is the engine of English growth. There is an English version of everything you love. Find it, and let your love of the subject carry you through the challenge of the language, because that love will keep you reading when discipline might fail. And it is reading, day after day, week after week, that builds everything. The third idea is this. The goal is not understanding everything. The goal is showing up. The goal is sitting down every morning and giving English 10 minutes of your attention. Some mornings you will understand a great deal. Some mornings you will understand less. Some mornings a piece of text will feel almost effortless. Some mornings it will feel like hard work. All of these mornings are good mornings. All of them are contributing to your growth. Because every morning you show up and read, your brain is building. Your brain is adapting. Your brain is getting better at English, even when you cannot feel it happening. And the days when you can feel it happening, when you suddenly understand something that was once difficult, when you suddenly read faster than you expected, when you suddenly find yourself reaching the end of an article and realizing you understood almost all of it, those days will come. Not immediately, but they will come. And when they do, you will know exactly why. Because you showed up every morning for 10 minutes without fail. I rode a bicycle 40 minutes every morning as a young boy just to be in the presence of English, just to hear it spoken, just to experience it as a living language. I would have given anything to have what you have right now. The ability to find English reading material on any topic that interests you, at any level that suits you, at any moment of any day. That resource is sitting in your pocket right now, in your phone, waiting, not judging, not demanding, just waiting for you to open it and begin. So tonight before you sleep, find something to read in English tomorrow morning, something you are genuinely curious about, something that will make you want to know what comes next. Put it somewhere easy to find, and tomorrow morning before everything else, sit down and read it, just 10 minutes, and then do it again the next day, and the day after that. One morning at a time, one page at a time, one word at a time, until one day, without drama, without a single announcement, English reading will have become something natural to you, something comfortable, something yours. And that day is not as far away as it seems. It is just 10 minutes away, starting tomorrow morning. Thank you, my friends, for being with me today. I hope what I shared with you today has given you not just a plan, but a feeling that reading is not a burden, but a gift you give to yourself every morning in 10 quiet minutes. Accept that gift, open it every day, and watch what grows from it. I will see you in the next one.